As I took my war veteran grandfather to the park, little did I know that our peaceful outing would turn into a shocking battle. Suddenly, Karen steals my grandfather's wheelchair, 'cause she's fat and needs it more. Here's how it all went down. It was a sunny day, and I decided to take my grandfather, a war veteran, to the park. He had recently been confined to a wheelchair due to an old war injury that had worsened over time. We found a nice spot with benches, and he preferred sitting on them rather than staying in his wheelchair. It was more comfortable for him, especially when eating. So we parked the wheelchair beside our bench, its handles adorned with colorful stickers I had given him over the years. I went to grab some ice cream for both of us, leaving my grandfather enjoying the sun and the gentle breeze. As I was waiting in line, I noticed a woman eyeing the wheelchair. She was on the heavier side, with a scowl that seemed permanent. I didn't think much of it, assuming she was just curious about the stickers. When I returned, my grandfather looked distressed. "The wheelchair's gone," he said, pointing to the empty space beside the bench. Panicking, I scanned the area. It didn't take long to spot the wheelchair. It was unmistakable with its unique stickers. The woman I had seen earlier was now sitting in it, a smug look on her face. "Hey!" I called out, approaching her with my grandfather slowly following behind. "That's our wheelchair!" She looked up, feigning innocence. "Oh, I thought it was abandoned. I need it more than whoever left it here." "That's my grandfather's wheelchair," I said, pointing to the stickers. "Those are the stickers I gave him. You can't just take it," she scoffed. "Look at me. I can barely walk because of my weight. I need this wheelchair more than some old man." My grandfather, ever the gentleman, tried to reason with her. "Ma'am, I understand it might be difficult for you, but that wheelchair is mine. It helps me move around." She rolled her eyes. "You were sitting on the bench. Clearly you don't need it as much as I do." I was taken aback. "Are you seriously trying to justify stealing a wheelchair from a war veteran?" She smirked. "Well, if he's a war veteran, he should know how to fight for what's his." I could feel my blood boiling. "You can't just take things that aren't yours." She leaned forward, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, can I?" Just then, a park ranger approached us. "Is there a problem here?" The woman pointed at me. "He's trying to take my wheelchair." The ranger looked at the stickers, then back at my grandfather. "Ma'am, that's clearly not your wheelchair," she huffed. "Well, I need it more than he does." The ranger raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." She looked outraged. "This is discrimination. Just because I'm overweight doesn't mean I don't have rights." The ranger sighed. "Ma'am, you're not being discriminated against. You're trying to take someone else's property. That's not allowed." She muttered something under her breath and reluctantly got up, leaving the wheelchair behind. The ranger turned to us. "I'm sorry about that. Some people just don't understand." I nodded. "Thank you for your help." He smiled. "No problem. Enjoy your day." As we settled back down, my grandfather chuckled. "Well, that was certainly interesting." I laughed. "You can say that again." He smiled. "It's a good thing you were here. I don't know what I would have done without you." I grinned. "I'll always have your back, Grandpa." We sat in silence for a moment, enjoying our ice creams and the gentle breeze. It was a beautiful day, and despite the unexpected encounter, we were determined to make the most of it. Suddenly, the woman returned, this time with a group of her friends. "This is the guy who tried to steal my wheelchair," she exclaimed, pointing at me. Her friends began to shout and jeer, creating a scene. My grandfather and I exchanged worried glances. The situation was escalating quickly. The park ranger, noticing the commotion, hurried over. "Ma'am, I already told you to leave. If you don't, I'll have to call the police." She sneered. "Go ahead. I'd love to see them try to arrest me." The ranger, true to his word, pulled out his radio and called for backup. Within minutes, a police car arrived, and 2 officers stepped out. The woman's bravado quickly faded as she realized the gravity of the situation. Her friends, sensing trouble, began to disperse. The officers took statements from us and the park ranger. The woman, now subdued, was given a stern warning and escorted out of the park. My grandfather and I, still in shock, decided to head home. As we left the park, he turned to me and said, "You know, in all my years, I've never seen anything quite like that." I nodded in agreement. "Me neither, Grandpa. Me neither." And as we walked away, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Grateful for my grandfather, for the sacrifices he had made, and for the lessons he had taught me. And in that moment, I realized that no matter what challenges we faced, we would always face them together. Wow, what a crazy story. Can't believe someone would actually steal a wheelchair from a war veteran. Glad the park ranger and police stepped in to resolve the situation. Kudos to the person who stood up for their grandfather. Family is everything. I never imagined that the man I married, a pastor, would confess to an affair and ask me to raise his love child. The weight of his request crushed me, but what followed was a spiral into a world of disillusionment and self-discovery. Here's how it all went down. At 29, I found myself married to a man 15 years my senior. We met at the church I began attending after relocating for my job at an insurance company. He was the pastor there. Despite our age difference, he always treated me with kindness and made me feel cherished. One evening, he returned home with a heavy heart and a look I hadn't seen before. "We need to talk," he began, his voice trembling. Through tears, he confessed to having an affair with a 34-year-old woman from our community. The weight of his words crushed me, but there was more. She had been pregnant with twins. Tragically, she and one of the babies had passed away during childbirth, leaving the other twin in the neonatal intensive care unit. "We need to step up," he said, suggesting we convert my office into a nursery and set up a cot for us to take turns caring for the child. I was overwhelmed. "I need time to think," I replied, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure I can do this." He tried to appeal to our faith, reminding me of our marital vows and suggesting that God had blessed us with this child. "God won't give us more than we can handle," he pressed. In my distress, I shot back. "It seems God gave her more than she could handle since she's gone." I instantly regretted my words, but before I could apologize, his hand met my face in a sharp slap. "You need to serve your husband," he said sternly. "God chose you to be this child's mother. You must be his humble servant." I just feel so strange. Yesterday, I cried so hard I threw up. This woman died, yet I feel bad for myself. I feel so ugly. I wanted children and was saving for IVF because I'm infertile, but now that I have a chance to have a child and I do not want it, I feel like I'd be robbing its mother's grave. I pray to God, but if I'm being honest, it's never felt like anyone was ever listening. I feel like I have truly seen my husband, and he no longer looks kind. He looks his age and very tired. I want to abandon him and the child. I'm only 29. I can start over. I have a remote job. I can take a day off when he goes to the NICU, pack my essentials and leave. Neither him nor the child deserve this, and although this is my situation, that is not my problem. I'm still processing all of this, and I just need a little time. I don't feel unsafe, just unloved, just not enough. My husband did apologize for slapping me and continues to express regret, but he can't take it back. Just as he cannot take back impregnating another woman, which ultimately killed her. I'm feeling so disillusioned with my whole life right now, and I know I should leave. I know that there is a world out there that will not treat me like this. But I am scared of change. I am working on a plan to leave and getting my affairs in order for when I am ready to go, but I am not sure when I would leave if I choose to. Many expressed that I should make a report to the police about him slapping me, and they're probably right. But that would likely cause me more problems than it would be worth. If I leave, it might make him want to contest the divorce more, and if I stay, it would cause more tension. I've been working on my self-defense skills, though, because I won't let him get away with it again. I'm not violent myself, but I'm prepared to protect myself because although I'm hurt, I am angry. I'm not sure if there will be an update, because I'm still unsure. I can make all the plans in the world, but the change scares me almost as much as succumbing to his will. I've been praying about it, but I see no clear answers or guidance. I don't know. Funny thing, I'm jealous of the people saying that this is fake. It's like I want my life to be like it was 2 weeks ago. I could read a crazy story on the internet and think, wow, that's crazy, seems kinda fake, and keep scrolling and go about my life. Only I can't scroll away in real life because that's just not how life works. I don't owe anyone proof of my life tragedies, least of all strangers on the internet whom I will never meet. I do thank all who have given support. I wish I could tell you I packed my bags and left his sorry jerk, but I'm not strong enough to yet. It's not that easy to do in real life as it turns out. Odd. Finally, I left. I didn't leave right away, as I know now that I should have. It just wasn't that easy. I stayed for 2 months. I knew if I did not at least try to make it work, I would not be able to live with it. Not because I wanted to save my marriage, but because what-ifs keep me up at night enough as is. I went to marriage counseling with my husband, but it was ultimately fruitless. Of course, it was Christian counseling, and I felt like their goal was for me to forgive him, rather than actually trying to help me. I was so utterly alone during that time. My parents and brother are also very religious, so even though they weren't happy with my husband, they kept urging me to do what a good Christian wife would do. I spent so much time suffering in my own head that I began to realize that I was just going through the motions, doing what I thought people expected of me. I entered a state of derealization for a time, and that was a difficult experience. The feeling of nothing being real, not even myself, was horrible. During this period, my husband brought his baby home, and while he tried to split the childcare responsibilities 50-50ths at first, he ultimately didn't trust me to look after the baby because I was lost in space. So he ended up being the primary caregiver. When I was with the baby, all I could think about was how its existence had a negative impact on my life. It would look at me with big blue eyes, and I would just wish it would disappear. I would actively spend time resenting the baby. There was a time when I was thinking to myself, and I wished it would stop breathing. That was when I knew that I needed to leave. I was blaming a baby and wishing harm upon it, and that was not okay to do. I don't remember much about this time besides that. It's mostly a blur otherwise. I sought services through my workplace to talk to a therapist, and I eventually came back to reality. She helped me make a plan. At no point did I fear my husband. I truly believe the slap was a one-off event. However, he doesn't deserve closure. On a night he had a long Bible study, he always took his baby with him because he didn't trust me. I packed my essentials and left. I met him pretty quickly after college, so I did not have much to take in terms of furnishings. I fit everything I wanted in 3 suitcases and 4 moving boxes. It all fit into my SUV after some mediocre Tetris skills. I was able to change my phone number online before I left, but I did leave the divorce papers under his pillow with my lawyer's contact information, kind of like the Tooth Fairy but for jerks. I was the breadwinner. In my state, we were not married long enough for me to pay spousal maintenance. At least that is what my lawyer said. I own my vehicle outright. We had our own bank accounts and a shared expenses account. We filed taxes separately, and the church owns the house. He's being difficult about it all, but I'm hoping it should be resolved soon. I got a decent apartment in a city a few hundred miles away. I've never lived in a city this big before. Everything is more expensive, but besides that, I like it. I found a new therapist, met some new friends, and found a new church with loving people. I still have my challenging days, but for the most part, I'm content. I think it will always hurt on some level, but I'm working on regaining my power. I turn 30 next month, and I am hopeful it will be the start of my best decade yet. It takes tremendous courage to make the decision to leave and prioritize your own well-being. You're absolutely right. Your ex-husband cannot use God to absolve himself of his mistakes, and it's completely understandable that you didn't want to take on the responsibility of raising his affair child. It's important to remember that you deserve happiness and fulfillment in your life, and it's not your duty to bear the consequences of his actions. Stay strong and continue to prioritize yourself, sending you positive vibes and wishing you a bright future ahead. I never expected my husband's reaction to our baby's gender to spiral into an emotional roller coaster. Husband is melting down over gender disappointment, I typed, narrating the turbulent journey of our pregnancy. Little did I know that his initial disappointment would lead us down a path of self-reflection, fears, and ultimately, a newfound understanding. Here's how it all went down. I am 13 weeks and 5 days, and we had our first trimester screening last week with a non-invasive prenatal test, NIPT. We opted for all the genetic testing, and this morning they called and told us everything was normal, and we're having a girl. I am elated. I didn't have a gender preference. I believe all genders have their pros and cons, and children will be who they're meant to be. I suppose I'm more excited for the closure. At a time when so much is uncertain, we have an answer to one of the biggest questions we had. I told my husband, and he was happy at first, but mentioned he was a little disappointed because he wanted a boy. However, as the day goes on, he's been expressing his disappointment more intensely than he let on during the pregnancy. He would make little jokes about manifesting that the baby is a boy and tell people that he wants the baby to be a boy. He's been reading articles online about gender disappointment, which say that what he's going through is normal, but his disappointment runs deep. He took a deep breath. It's not about wanting a boy for the sake of it, it's just, I've seen the challenges here, especially in the Southeast. I thought maybe a boy wouldn't have to face some of them. I looked at him, trying to gauge the depth of his feelings. Every child has their own set of challenges, regardless of gender. He ran his fingers through his hair, frustrated. I know that, but think about the healthcare, the discrimination she might face being mixed race, or if she identifies as LGBTQ+. And then there's the fear of her being preyed upon. I nodded. Those are valid concerns, but they'd exist for a boy too, in different ways. He looked away. I wanted to give our child the best shot, you know? We still can, I replied. By being there, by educating, by preparing. We can't control everything, but we can control how we respond and prepare, he sighed. I just need some time to process this. Take all the time you need, I said, understanding that sometimes emotions aren't straightforward. He also mentioned feeling a diminished bond with our daughter due to sexist stereotypes, such as his concerns about her liking clothes shopping, the need to teach her modesty, and his belief that he can't teach her how to use the bathroom properly. I reassured him that children will have their own preferences, and it's possible to have a girl who enjoys trucks or a boy who likes to paint his nails. While we can influence their interests to some extent, ultimately, children will be who they are. Additionally, he expressed the belief that girls are harder to raise, coinciding with an incident involving our 12-year-old niece who got in trouble at school. I countered that it may not be fair to generalize based on our niece's behavior, as this is just a small sample size and not a valid scientific basis for such a claim. He then said that he was hoping for a boy because he wanted to be a better father to his son than his own deadbeat father was, and he was slightly insecure about his own masculinity and wanted a son to prove that he could be masculine and raise a masculine son. I said he should unpack that in therapy. He has a therapist he sees once a week on Thursdays. Have any of you dealt with this? I searched, but most of the gender disappointment posts were from the pregnant people themselves, or relatives, friends, gender disappointment, but not the spouse. I like the advice that he'll feel differently when he holds her for the first time, but that's 6 months from now and I have to live with him that whole time, lol. I am trying to not let him ruin my day excitement, but it's tough. After what felt like an eternity, the day finally came when I gave birth to our beautiful daughter. The way he looked at her, the pure adoration in his eyes, was something I hadn't seen before. It was evident that he was head over heels in love with her, and any reservations he had before seemed to have melted away. One of the things that seemed to help him move past his initial gender disappointment was the fact that he got to choose her name. It gave him a sense of connection and involvement that was deeply personal. His therapist played a significant role in helping him navigate his feelings. Through their sessions, he came to understand that his anxiety wasn't so much about our daughter's gender, but more about the overwhelming reality of becoming a parent. The fact that we were having a girl made everything more tangible for him. He knew what it was like to be a boy, but the idea of raising a girl was unfamiliar territory. It was the double whammy of stepping into the unknown world of parenting and doing so with a gender he didn't personally experience. But as the days went by, he began to see the absurdity in some of his earlier concerns. He had worried that his interests wouldn't align with hers because they weren't girly. Yet, as he watched our little one, he realized her world currently revolved around basic things like shapes, colors, and, of course, feeding times. It was amusing to think that he had been married to me for 8 years, a woman who shared many of his interests, yet it took the birth of our daughter to drive home the point that interests aren't strictly defined by gender. My niece, bless her heart, is still a handful, but he's come to understand that her behavior, or the complex relationships he has with some of the women in his life, doesn't define all female experiences. I often joke that I should send a bouquet to his therapist for the progress they've made. And about the whole shopping debacle, when he mentioned his fear of shopping for a girl, he wasn't stereotyping. He genuinely felt clueless about shopping for women's clothes. To be honest, even after 32 years of being a woman, I still find women's fashion a mystery. I mean, seriously, where are all the pockets? All this to say, the gender disappointment issue ended up being that he ruined one day I had back in March of this year. He loves our daughter, does not resent her for not being a boy, and didn't leave me over his gender disappointment. I just want other parents experiencing this to know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you to everyone who weighed in. I felt really validated. Being a parent is not for everyone, and it's crazy how much importance society used to place on gender. I hope that kid will have good parents who love and support them, regardless of their gender. As the youngest sibling in a split family, I found solace in Catholic symbols after a tumultuous upbringing. But when a potential love interest questions my devotion, tensions rise within my stepmother's judgmental realm. Here's how it all went down. So, some background context is required to fully understand my situation. I, 23-year-old male, and I have an older brother, 26-year-old. My mom was old school Catholic, and my dad was an atheist. My brother and I were raised Catholic, and my dad never minded. When I was about 11, my parents got a divorce, and my dad got custody. My mom changed after the divorce. My brother and I are no contact with her. A little while after, my brother and I started being outspoken atheists to stick it to mom. In reality, my brother was just coming into his own, and the church didn't have a place in his life. And I was the younger brother who followed his big brother. My dad almost instantly remarried to a woman I affectionately called the witch as a kid because I didn't know how my dad loved her without her putting a spell on him. She was rude, elitist, gold-digging, a total Karen. My father changed because of his wife, but he still loved us and tried his best with us. I will always defend the fact that he was a good father. His only flaw was his taste in women, but he was never the same and always prioritized his wife. As a child, I suffered from night terrors and had trouble sleeping throughout middle school. My stepmother suggested medication and therapy, which wasn't what I needed. I now realize that I have trauma related to my mother's abuse and her encouragement of my brother's suicide. One day, while searching through old boxes, I found my communion cross that had been gifted to me. Due to the nostalgia of a time when I had a real family, I hung it on my wall. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully like a baby. This happened during my sophomore year of high school. I realized that I felt safe around Catholic symbols. Nothing else in my life at that time brought me comfort, so I started going to the local church to escape from home. The congregation accepted me, and I even began apprenticing with a blacksmith who attended the church. By the beginning of my junior year, I had become a born-again Catholic. I wore a cross that I had forged myself every day. On the surface, my father and stepmother were supportive, and if Karen wasn't around, my dad genuinely supported me. He drove me to church and such. However, my stepmother would ask that I not wear a cross when there are guests over. Additionally, one of her favorite things to do is give house tours to show off how much her husband makes and how nice her house is. After I decorated my room with various religious items, she stopped showing off my room, which I didn't mind. She also screamed at me if I ever dared to leave my Bible anywhere outside my room. She would also make snide comments constantly. At 18, I enlisted and served 5 years in the Marines. Now that I'm back home, I'm staying in my old room until my brother and I can rent an apartment together, and I can start college. My stepmom introduced me to the daughter of her friends. She was pretty and nice when I first met her, and it seemed like our mothers were trying to set us up, so I decided to give it a shot. We went on 2 dates, and although we didn't really connect, I enjoyed experiencing civilian life, so I decided to continue seeing her. However, things started to get complicated when we were planning our 3rd date over text. The only day she was available was Sunday. I told her that I was volunteering on Sunday afternoon. She suggested a breakfast date in the morning, but I explained that I had church. She seemed surprised and said she didn't know I was religious. I simply replied, "Yeah, I am," and suggested that she could join me in volunteering. I'm helping the church organize a small fair where local artists sell their work to raise money. Since she was an artist, I thought she might enjoy it. However, she declined and stopped texting me. That was 2 days ago. Yesterday, I came back from a run to find my stepmom and the girl's mom having brunch. I grabbed some water and had a polite conversation. The topic of the 3rd date came up, and they asked why I wouldn't go. Confused, I said I would go, but I had plans on Sunday and we needed to find a new date. I explained what I was doing. My stepmom said in a half-annoyed voice, "Oh, you're still on that." I learned at a young age that it was futile to engage with her, so I simply replied, "Yeah, I am," and walked away to deal with my frustrations in a productive manner. However, it seems that the mere mention of still being in my religious phase made the girl uneasy. Last night, she knocked on my door and asked to talk, but she barged in before I could refuse. She then proceeded to lecture me about how a girl like her only comes along once in a lifetime, and I shouldn't be spiteful just because she doesn't share my beliefs. This confused me because I was the one who was ignored, and I never did anything to be spiteful. So, I asked her to clarify, and she launched into one of her "my voice is calm, so I'm right" rants about how I should have canceled my plans to take her out that Sunday. She asserted that just because my church says men can treat women however they want, it doesn't mean I can. At that point, I simply left the room. She is impossible to argue with, and if she gets angry, chaos ensues. Since then, my stepmom keeps saying things like, "I just lost a good girl over a myth," or "women don't like stuck-up men." And as usual, my dad is staying out of it. As for the girl I was set up with, I don't really care. I mean, it's her choice. And honestly, I'm trying to ask out a childhood friend anyway. I think I was just being kind by taking her out. I also don't care that my family is atheist. They have every right to believe what they want. In fact, I served 5 years to protect that right. Personally, I believe the worst sin one can commit is to deny someone their convictions. However, it's becoming increasingly difficult not to respond. The rest of my family is either supporting her or staying out of it. My step-aunts are sending me atheist articles and other pieces in an attempt to prove that Sky Daddy doesn't exist. I'm the only member of my family who is not openly atheist. I am already seen as different for enlisting instead of attending an Ivy League college and not conforming to politics or business. I have asked them to stop, but they are not respecting my wishes because they feel the need to unbrainwash me. It's becoming annoying. I don't want to cut off contact completely because I love my dad, and apparently, they come as a package deal. My brother, being the only rational person, is backing me. He thinks the whole thing is stupid and is putting in more time looking for apartments for us so we can just leave the house. I'm not hopeful that they'll come around and accept me, but I'm not compromising my faith just because my stepfamily wants to be judgmental. Don't mind your family. Everyone has the right to choose whatever they want to believe. It's important to stay true to yourself and your convictions. Surround yourself with people who respect and support your choices. Keep moving forward, and don't let the judgment of others deter you. If you enjoyed today's stories, check out the other videos on your screen now. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.